What do you think? Was Isabella of France right to kill her husband? Let me know your thoughts down below. And as always, thank you for watching. The year is 1295, and a baby girl is born to French royalty. Named Isabella, she is the daughter of Philip IV, the powerful and ambitious king of France. As such, she is a prize to be bartered on the medieval political marriage market, and her father will soon arrange for her to be wed to the King of England. Only there's a bit of a problem with that. You see, the King of England, the future Edward II, has a really bad reputation among his nobles. They don't like him. He's unpopular, controversial, and many think he's a bit of a weirdo. But it's not because he's a bad guy or anything like that. It's because he likes guys. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Except this is medieval England, and this kind of thing will get you killed. So Edward's father, the previous king, died and left him a rather large problem. But now that Edward was king, it was time to move past the problem and focus on more important issues, like marrying off the French princess, Isabella. So he did. When Isabella was just 12 years old, she was shipped off to England to marry her new husband. The wedding was lavish and grand, but none of that happiness rubbed off on the young bride, who entered her new home and realized that she was about to become queen of a very weird country. You see, while the king was kind and generous and not really a bad guy, he was deeply invested in his male favorites, two of which he showered with titles, land, wealth and power that should have gone to his family and nobles. This created a rift between him and his wife, who despised these men, especially one of them, a brash young lord named Piers Gaveston, who was promoted beyond his station and given too much power to young. By the time Isabella was 16, she had had enough. She didn't want to be queen. She wanted to be a mom. But the king's dalliances with his favorites meant that even that small joy was taken away from her. She was only 16 when she gave birth to her first child, a boy, and the king was so enamored with Gaveston that he brought him to the delivery room. Yeah, that's a real thing that happened. No wonder the kid turned out the way he did, and the rift between the king and his wife only grew from there. Eventually, Isabella fled to France with her kids and stayed there for a few years until she got a message from her brother, the French king, asking if she could come back to France and help negotiate a peace treaty between England and France. But she wasn't keen on returning to England. She hated living there, and besides, how could she go back after her husband had defied her so badly? You see, in the time that she was gone, the king had taken another young man under his wing, a handsome courtier named Hugh Despenser the Younger. He had quickly risen to power, becoming the king's chamberlain, a position of great power and influence. He also got the title Earl of Winchester and huge amounts of money and land, all of which had been taken from Isabella's own family and supporters. And so she wasn't exactly thrilled to be going back to England. But eventually she agreed to return to England if the king would banish Despenser from his court. He wouldn't hear of it, of course. And so Isabella never went back. She had finally reached a breaking point, and she was done. She wasn't going to live under the thumb of her husband's latest favorite. That may have been the end of it, except for the fact that her brother, King Charles IV of France, was at war with her husband, King Edward II. So now Isabella was stuck in France with her kids, watching her brother wage war against her husband. She hated her brother for that, but she also couldn't go back to her husband. There was nothing to do but wait. And during that time, she found comfort in the arms of a fellow exile. You see, England and France weren't the only places with dramatic courts. All across Europe, kings and queens were having affairs, breaking alliances, starting wars, and doing all sorts of shocking things. And in England, one of the biggest enemies of the Despencer family was a powerful nobleman named Roger Mortimer, who had once been imprisoned by the king in the infamous Tower of London for daring to criticize his favorite. Now Roger had escaped and made his way to France, where he heard about the exiled Queen Isabella. The two nobles met, struck up a friendship, and eventually began a passionate affair. And thus, Queen Isabella of England had a secret lover. But if she was unhappy in her marriage, why didn't she just divorce her husband? Well, there are two reasons. First of all, she couldn't. See, Edward and Isabella had been married for over 10 years and had 3 kids together. Even though Edward was a little weird when it came to men, he had been a good husband to Isabella and had never been unfaithful to her. And that meant that they were still technically man and wife, whether they liked it or not. Secondly, Isabella knew that neither she nor her brother would approve of a divorce. They both thought it was scandalous and immoral. Even the Pope, who was usually pretty easy when it came to granting divorces, refused to do it. So Isabella had only one option left: depose her husband and take the throne for herself. And with her lover, Roger Mortimer, by her side, she began to plot. In 1325, the opportunity finally presented itself. The peace treaty negotiations between England and France fell apart and war seemed imminent. The French king ordered his sister to return home immediately and join the fight. But Isabella refused unless Despencer was banished from the court. Again, she wasn't going back until her demands were met. Again, the king refused, and so she remained in France, biding her time. Then in 1326, King Charles declared war on England, and Isabella knew it was time to make her move. A few weeks later, she and her lover set sail from the Netherlands with a small but well-funded army, thanks to the backing of Queen Isabella, and began their invasion of England. Much to her surprise, she didn't meet much resistance. Her husband had alienated so many people with his bizarre behavior and his promotion of the Despencer family that hardly anyone cared when she invaded. Soon, she was at the gates of London and inside the city. Her husband knew that he was in trouble. He desperately tried to rally his nobles and put down this rebellion of his wife. But no one came to his aid. They had had enough of the king's nonsense and were happy to see the back of him and his favorites. Queen Isabella stormed the castle and threw both Hugh Despencer, the younger and the elder, into the Tower of London. There they were executed in a brutal public spectacle that sent shockwaves throughout England. Then she took the throne for herself, though her husband was still alive. But that wouldn't last long. Edward II was eventually captured and forced to abdicate the throne in favor of his son. the 14-year-old Edward III. After that, he was thrown into prison where he died. Historians debate the cause of his death, but most agree that he was murdered on Isabella's orders. So now Isabella of France was the Queen Mother of England, ruling on behalf of her son, the young King Edward III, while secretly seizing all power for herself and her lover, Roger Mortimer. But her time in charge wouldn't last long. See, everyone hated her. She was an outsider and a foreigner, and people didn't like that she had seized power for herself and her lover. Plus, the English people were sick of French interference in their country, and so they rose up in 1330 and arrested Mortimer, forcing Isabella into retirement and ending her political career. Roger Mortimer was executed for treason, and Isabella spent her final years in a monastery, where she lived in luxurious confinement. The end of her official narrative states that she died of natural causes, but that's probably just what they wanted the people to think. As for how Edward II died, well, the most popular theory among historians is that he was brutally murdered by order of Isabella, his wife, who had him impaled with a red-hot poker through his bowels, a ghastly death designed to leave no external marks. The exact details of his death may be lost to history, but what isn't lost on us today is the legacy of Isabella of France, a medieval queen who dared to defy her husband and seize power for herself, even if it meant murdering him. Now you know. Why is Isabella of France called the She-Wolf of France? Because of her ruthless ambition and her role in her husband's overthrow and death. To learn more about the strange and scandalous world of medieval royalty, check out the series in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.